In this lesson, we're going to learn about the whole process of creating animated 3D characters. In this video, first, I'm not going to create an entire 3D character, animated character, because it will take sometimes months to create a whole complete character, so I can't show you that in minutes. But I will kind of show you all the steps in a very short form and demonstrate it with a very simple example. And also, you're not going to learn how to make a very complex character. Rather, you learn what things in Blender you need to learn, you need to know in order to be able to create full characters, and what are the exact steps of creating fully animated 3D characters, whether it's realistic or stylized or very simple for mobile games. So let me quickly go over all the steps of creating characters, animated characters, because characters can be static, just kind of sculptures, or animated, optimized for games. So the first step, like any other project, you need a kind of concept or drawing or a reference from the internet. And then you need to create, you need to model. Characters are usually created by sculpting them. Sculpting is a kind of special technique, set of tools that you use to dynamically create some organic shapes. So we will look at some of the tools in this video. And then we have something called retopology, because when you create 3D characters, especially when you want to make something realistic, we need to have a lot of polygons. I assume you understand what polygons are, what topology is. So retopology is creating the character from scratch on top of your already modeled or sculpted character. So I will show you, I will demonstrate that too, what retopology means and why we need this during the video, in this video. So the next step is, like any other project, you need to texture, you need to give materials to make it look good, right? Colors, materials. So this is the textures, this is the next step. And texturing characters involves some special process like baking or painting. So the next step is rigging or skinning, or this is essentially putting some control points on different parts of your character in order to be able to animate. So the last step in creating 3D animated characters is, of course, animation. If you have a good rig, you can animate it easily. If you don't have a good rig, animation is really hard. And now I'll show you something. So these colors kind of represent how difficult or how long these different steps will take. The darker color means the longer it will take and the harder it is, this step is. And the lighter color is but remember, this is very, very personal. It is just my experience, and it also depends on the character that you're making. If you're making a very, very simple, very low poly character, maybe you don't even sculpt, you just model, and it will take very little time, and you kind of get rid of retopology if you model. If you don't sculpt, you don't have this step. Also, I should mention one thing. Each of these steps can be one job. In big studios, there are concept artists which only draw the concept for characters. And there are people who actually create the character, like sculpt, retopology. There are people who are specialized in rigging. As you can see now, this is a really, really long process, creating 3D animated characters, and if you want to kind of make all by yourself, it means you know all of these steps and you can do all of that. Actually, you cannot specialize before you know all of these. So yeah, let's go and demonstrate these in Blender. So what I'd like to make is elephant's trunk. It's kind of funny, but in order to make this trunk, we need to kind of take all those steps. We need this reference image. We will kind of sculpt it or quickly sculpt this shape, and we need to retopologize it because we have a lot of details here, and we need to paint or texture it, and also we need to rig and animate. This needs to be animated because it animates. So I have done the first step, but I'm not going to use that reference image of the elephant's trunk because it's such a simple project, so we don't need that reference. But anyways, that is an important step, because you need to know what you're going to make. You need to have a kind of image in your head about what project you're going to make, what your finished project should look like. So you need to have some sort of picture of that. So yeah, now let's go ahead and insert a cylinder. And I don't need that many vertices, we need only 6 maybe. And let's go to edit mode, scale it down. I'm looking from front, GZ, SZ, to make it larger or longer or higher, taller, whatever. So let's increase the scale here. And this, I don't know if it is, go to edit mode, Control R a few times. And let's duplicate this because we might need this in the future. So I will call it trunk, so simple or something. And this original one will be trunk sculpt. I will sculpt this, and trunk simple, I will hide this, and let's sculpt this trunk sculpt. Let's go to sculpting. So this is the sculpting interface or workspace in Blender. So sculpting is kind of a process of creating organic shapes with the help of brushes, different brushes. Yeah, you can extrude things, you can kind of draw some shapes. So we have tons of tools here, brushes here. Actually, I have a full course on Blender on Udemy, and there is a whole section explaining all the powerful tools and all the techniques of sculpting in that course. You can check out that course and the sculpting section. The link will be in the description of this video. So let's go ahead and try to sculpt something. Let's go and turn on dynamic topology. This will help you to dynamically create the topology. And let's I don't know if I ever need this symmetry here. I think I don't need symmetry, but let's turn on X symmetry so that we have something interesting here. And let's bring this, let's use constant detail and increase the detailing to 12 or something, and let's test it. It's much finer, and we can Shift Z to see how fine it is. And even, let's make it even finer, press 20 and detail flood fill. You can see with F you can increase the brush size, and with Shift F you can increase or decrease the strength. As you can see here, I need less strength, so let's go and smooth things out here. I looked at some reference images, and I learned some parts of elephant's trunk. And you can use textures here with some interesting details. So let's have this, where is it? Crease brush, and let's draw some interesting shapes here and there, just like that. You have a lot of options here to make things much better than this, but yeah, let's call this finished sculpt. So we looked at the reference image and we sculpted, we modeled the base block, and then we sculpted. Now it's time to retopologize it. So retopology, as I said earlier, is trying to recreate the entire sculpt from scratch. Luckily, in our case, we don't have to do that for a long time because it's a very, very simple shape. So let's bring this trunk simple back, and let's go to edit mode, select everything, and subdivide it one more time. And I think this will be enough for our purpose. Let's select this face, X, and remove this face, and let's fill it in a strange fashion. Control F, and let's fill it. Try grid fill, how it will fill. That's fine. I'm not unhappy with this. Scale it down. That's all right. So now let's try one technique. You need to match the exact shape of your sculpt. You can't simply do this. So what I'm doing is trying to match this new shape, just like the trunk. In order for that, we can snap all the faces of our simplified mesh on top of this sculpted mesh. So let's use a shrink wrap modifier, and let's select the target. The sculpted mesh will be our target. And now, as you can see, it's not looking bad. Actually, we can make this trunk simple mesh, and we can not here, it's viewport display. We can make it look in front. Yeah, that's fine. I think that's all right. And let's actually apply this, and let's call it not trunk simple, but trunk retopo. So now we have a simplified mesh, but you might be saying now, yeah, it's simplified, but it looks terrible, right? We don't have any details. We don't have any details that we have here in the sculpt. Where are these details? So here, something called baking details comes into play. We can capture these details onto an image texture or normal texture and apply that normal texture on top of this simplified surface. So this is how it works. So let's leave this and let's smooth this too. I think smooth view is better. So what is good about baking is we will simplify our model just like this, and but we will try to keep those fine details, these creases. So how do we do that? As you can see in Sculpt, if I turn on Sculpt, we have about 80,000 polygons or faces. But with the simplified, we have only around 350 faces, which is ideal for animation, which we can animate easily, even a potato computer can animate that. So, but this is impossible to animate. This is impossible to do anything. We can't even deform it. We can't even pose it. We cannot do anything with this. So it will just a sculpt, right? Just a statue that you see in real life. So how do we do this? A really good way to capture those details is by using multi-resolution modifier. So let's apply multi-resolution to trunk retopo, not trunk sculpt, trunk retopo. And let's subdivide it and increase the resolution. And now we have here we have around 90,000 faces, which is not great, but we only need that resolution to capture the details. Again, we will shrink wrap our retopo on top of the sculpt. So let's apply shrink wrap modifier, give shrink wrap to this retopo, and use this sculpt as a target. Now you can see these fine details on our retopo object, simplified, but it is not simplified now because it has 90,000 faces. But now it will allow us to capture these details onto a texture. So let's go to shading and let's bring in a material. So let's call this material trunk simply. If you noticed, I have moved to this next step, which is texturing. This is the texturing step. And I'm creating a material, I'm baking textures and capturing details, and painting we will come here too. So we are in the next step in the process of creating a nice material on top of our retopology. So let's create a texture, image texture, new texture. Let's call it trunk normal. and this will be 2K, 248, 2048. Alpha, we will uncheck alpha because we don't need that, and OK. And now let's create non-color, and we will bake texture, the details. We will bake the details on top of this texture. This is a real image texture. Now we can bake it, but we need to do a few things before we start baking. So first of all, we need to come here and apply this shrink wrap modifier. And another thing that we need to do is that Blender for some reason requires this number to be down to about 1. 1 is a good number, but just don't leave it at 4 for some reason. And we don't have to know exactly why. And another very important step, it's a whole new step here. It's part of texturing and material workflow. If you don't know what it is, I'll just demonstrate. It is UV editing. In order to bake things onto our mesh or texture, we need to have UVs unwrapped. We need to unwrap the UVs. So a very simple unwrap. I don't need any fancy unwrap here. So Control E, so mark seam, and let's select these. So I don't know, maybe let's select this and this. Control E, mark seam. Now let's select everything, U, unwrap. Do you think it's a nice unwrap? I don't think so. Control E, mark seam, select everything, because we need to use the space as much as possible, as much as we can. So we are fine with this. Now finally we are able to bake the texture. So, and another very strange thing that Blender requires us is that we need to select this object, and also we need to select this texture. This object and this texture should be active selection. So then, only then we can click bake. So I have baked. So let's go to, I don't know, maybe UV editing, and let's bring that texture, trunk normal. Now, if you look carefully, we have an interesting thing here. We have these nice details. So let's go to shading. Now I think we don't need this modifier. Even with 0, we have no details here. As you can see, we have no details. But let's plug this with a vector, normal map. Normal, color to color, normal to normal. Now you can see we have these nice details. Go to rendered view, bring in a light. The faces are 350 or something. So this is a really important step. Now we can keep it like this. Of course we can paint. Let's get rid of this multi-resolution modifier. We don't need it anymore. We have only 350 or something faces, but we have those nice details. So yeah, these details here, as you can see. And don't forget to save this image file. And let's give it a simple color. I don't want to make, as I said, this plastic, or I don't know. This is a trunk, let's say. I can, of course, go to texture painting, and not on this. I can create a new texture, base color, and call it trunk base color, 2K 2048. I don't need alpha, this color, or whatever color I like. Okay, and I can always bring it in a texture, any texture, so base color or whatever, and bring in a texture from the internet. Open whatever texture you want. I have downloaded one trunk texture. Just Google trunk texture and find some textures that you like. I will open the one now. So this is an interesting trunk texture. As you can see, we can go back here and not tiled but stencil, and as you can see, we have this nice texture. We can image aspect, and with right click I can move it. With shift right click I can scale it down. With right click I can move, and I can simply draw this interesting trunk material, as you can see here. So not the best trunk in the world, but that's okay. As you can see, we have something. As you can see, we have textured, we have painted, baked, right? Now let's go and rig this to prepare it for animation. As you have seen now, in order to create textures, you need to know a lot of things. You need to know how to create UV maps, like we have here, right? Select everything. We have here, these are UV maps. We need to know how to bake stuff in Blender, right? And we need to know the understanding of multi-resolution modifier and other modifiers. We need to know how to use texture painting, how to shade things in Blender. So a lot of things only for shading and animation, right? And also for retopologizing, we need to know some other things like modeling skills, and some modifiers like shrink wrap and some other tools in order to make our retopology process a bit faster. Now for rigging, we need to have a complete understanding of how armatures or skeletons or bones work in Blender. How do we rig organic stuff like this? How do we rig mechanical stuff? We need to understand these concepts. To rig something, we need to have bones or armature or control points, in other words. So in this case, let's create a control point or an armature here. Actually, armature objects are a completely new, different set of objects, and you don't need to understand everything here. The only need that you need to know is that there is a new concept of bones, armatures, and bone constraints for animation, and the different modes that we have for bones. For example, we have object mode, we have edit mode, and we have a new mode called pose mode. So yeah, in edit mode, we create new bones, we scale them, we do other things, right? Let's create this. Easy. Now, how do we? Now, if I go to pose mode and if I rotate, I can't kind of deform the trunk. How do we parent? How do we connect this mesh and these bones? So it's simple in object mode. Luckily, Blender can make this very easy for us. So select this trunk, select the object, and shift select the bone in wireframe view if you want, and Control P and armature deform. We will choose with automatic weights. Let's go, and automatically Blender create a lot of vertex groups here and kind of parented all those vertices to these different bones. Now let's select the bones, Control Tab to pose mode, and let's test it. I'm looking from the side with 3, and now I can kind of deform, right? As you can see, I need more bones here, so I can simply undo everything and go to edit mode. I can subdivide this, subdivide this. I don't know the anatomy of elephant's trunk, but I think these numbers of bones are enough, this number of bones. So let's do that again. Shift select the bones, Control P with automatic weights. Now if you Control Tab, select the bones, and Control Tab to go into pose mode. And now, as you can see, I can easily go to material preview. We have this interesting trunk. So select everything, Alt R to undo this rotation. I'm looking from the side, Shift Z. If you want to successfully rig things in Blender, you need to know a few things. First of all is the armature set system here in Blender, the bones and how each bone affects different parts of the mesh. And we need to understand what are vertex groups and weight painting. Also, it's really good to know what shape keys are, and a really good bonus will be drivers in Blender. So yeah, as you can see, a lot of things only for rigging. As you can see, we have finished this process. We haven't finished, we have just kind of looked in a very general sense. We have looked at this rigging or skinning step. Now it's time for animation. I will create a very simple animation in a really simple way. So animation is simply kind of keeping one pose and changing the pose over time to a different pose. So let me show you what I mean. Go to pose mode of this armature, select all bones and press I and save the rotation. And I will select this keyframe. This is called keyframe. You need to know what animation is. You need to understand basics of animation first before you can animate stuff in Blender. For example, keyframe, what are keyframes and other things, right? What is this timeline? We have a lot of other things for animation, but I'm trying to keep things simple here. And let's create an interesting pose. Actually, I missed one thing when I was talking about rigging. There is bone constraints and object constraints which will help us. So we have tons of tools here which are really helpful in rigging, and the constraints, the job of constraints is to automate the process of animation or rigging. I will select all the bones and save this pose. And now if you look, we have a very simple animation here. Shift D and put it right here. Now let's play it. We have this animation. I don't know if it is looking good, but this is it. We also have some interesting things. Pressing T, we can change it and see what happens. So it's an interesting one. So yeah, this is how we make stuff in Blender, how we create animated 3D characters in Blender, as you can see. So this is basically it. Of course, there are a lot of other things that you need to learn, but at least you now have all the information about what you really need to master in order to create fully rigged animated 3D character in Blender. So yeah, hopefully this video was helpful. And if you really want to learn Blender much better than this and also support this channel, you can check out my full Blender course on Udemy. The link will be in the description. There you will have almost everything about Blender. So yeah, thank you for watching this video and check that course out.